Today's focus is the skeletal system, and we're going to focus in lecture on the tissues of the skeletal system. We're going to focus on bone and cartilage, and then we'll take a look at the organs. We'll take a look at some of the features of the bones of our bodies in particular. So bone and cartilage are two types of connective tissues. If you recall, they were both the structurally supportive connective tissues of our body. We're going to start with cartilage. So cartilage is a connective tissue that is avascular or mostly avascular, and it does lack innervation. So what this means is that if you damage cartilage, it is likely not to bleed, and the cartilage itself will actually not hurt. There's no pain experienced if there's no innervation there. However, if there's been damage to cartilage, oftentimes there's damage to the softer tissues surrounding your cartilage, and so that's where you'll experience the pain and the bleeding from generally. So cartilage is definitely one of those tissues that you would not want to damage, in particular, not because it's not going to hurt, but because it's going to be slow to heal. Any tissue with low levels of blood flow is not going to heal very well. The better the blood flow, the more blood flowing through a tissue, generally the faster healing takes place. So cartilage is a very difficult tissue to heal should it become damaged. Cartilage is in the body, so we'll talk about the three types: hyaline cartilage, elastic cartilage, and fibrocartilage. They're going to be surrounded by a thin layer of dense, irregular connective tissue on their superficial surface. That covering of dense, irregular connective tissue is called the perichondrium. So here's a nice introduction to our root word. You're going to see a lot of cartilage-related terms have this root cond. Cond, you should start training your brain, is going to mean cartilage. Anything with cond is related to cartilage. Peri is to surround something. So perichondrium is the layer of dense, irregular connective tissue that surrounds our cartilages. Hyaline cartilage and elastic cartilage everywhere in your body are going to be surrounded by perichondrium. Fibrocartilage is the only one that does not have that covering. Cartilage is mostly made of ground substance, and the ground substance in cartilage is a water-based ground substance. It's actually a very firm, gel-like consistency. So this ground substance is what gives cartilage its resiliency. Cartilage is really, really good at experiencing and resisting both compression, which is the pushing forces, and tension, which are the pulling forces. The compressive forces are resisted mostly due to this gel-like ground substance. So cartilage is a little bit squishy and kind of springs back to its original shape because of that ground substance. I think of it a lot of times kind of like those stress balls. You can kind of squeeze those stress balls down and then they spring right back out. That's a lot like the consistency of cartilage. So we'll take a closer look now at the three cartilage tissue types. If you were asked on an exam, for example, to identify this tissue and you just answer cartilage, that's not a sufficient answer. Keep in mind, if I can ever ask you the question, but what kind, then you haven't fully answered the question. So cartilage is not a tissue type. Cartilage is a category, and within that category, there are three specific tissue types. So hyaline cartilage, elastic cartilage, and fibrocartilage. I'm going to flip back and forth between this slide and the next. Hyaline cartilage gets its name because if you look at it with your naked eye, it kind of looks like glass. It has this translucent appearance. There's a ton of collagen in hyaline cartilage, but the collagen is very thin and it's very swirly. So it's kind of described as these thin collagen fibrils swirling around. And they are so thin that you can't actually see individual collagen fibers. Instead, when you look at hyaline cartilage, it generally looks like a cloud of collagen. Of course, the collagen is a protein, and that protein stains pink under the microscope when we use our H&E combination of dyes. So the pink that you see in between all of the cells here in this top picture of hyaline cartilage is all the collagen swirling around the cells. So that's your hyaline. Collagen fibrils swirling around the cells. Now the cells, the mature cells of cartilage are called chondrocytes. Here's that word again. Remember the root chond. Cyte means cell. So chondrocytes, every single one of these purple spots represents the nucleus of a chondrocyte. And in our cartilage, those chondrocytes are always going to be living in lacuna. The lacuna is the little lake that surrounds each chondrocyte. Every single chondrocyte needs to be in contact with its plasma membrane with some sort of a watery environment to facilitate the appropriate diffusion of materials into and out of the cell. The firm gel ground substance would not support that kind of diffusion. So chondrocytes live in lacuna so that they can experience that kind of diffusion into and out of the cells. The extracellular matrix ground substance in all three types of cartilage is chondroitin sulfate mixed with water. That's going to give it this firm gel-like consistency. And I think some people have a hard time experiencing or understanding how can a water-based ground substance have such a firm gel-like consistency. And the best example I can give you is if you've ever made Jell-O, right? You know exactly what I'm talking about. Jell-O is mostly water. If you've ever made Jell-O, you just boil a bunch of water, pour in the Jell-O packet, and put it in the refrigerator. And a couple of hours later, you get that thickened material that we call Jell-O. It is mostly water, but it's not runny anymore because of the materials that we've mixed with it. The chondroitin sulfate does the same thing to the water to give this gel-like ground substance in our cartilage. And so that's going to be found in all three cartilage types as well. Hyaline cartilage up on top, fibrocartilage is the picture in the middle here, and elastic cartilage is the picture on the bottom here. Let's go back and talk a little bit more about the hyaline cartilage. So we've got a lot of collagen. We've got that chondroitin sulfate ground substance. Hyaline cartilage is going to provide support, but also it will be a little bit flexible. The water content in the ground substance is going to enable hyaline cartilage to absorb compressive forces. Remember, those are the pushing forces, but to also, because of the collagen, resist pulling forces, resist tension. We find hyaline cartilage all over our body. It is the most abundant cartilage. Hyaline cartilage is found in our nose. Hyaline cartilage forms the rings in our trachea and in our larynx, all the way down into our bronchi, the tubes inside of your lungs. Hyaline cartilage is connecting all of our ribs to our sternum. That's referred to as the costal cartilage. Flipping back here, everything that you're seeing highlighted this light blue color is hyaline cartilage. Hyaline cartilage forms a covering at the surface of all of our bones that meet one another at movable joints. These are referred to as the articular cartilages at the articulations or the joints of our bodies. Again, all freely movable joints. You can see all the joints in the hand, the elbow, the shoulder, all the joints of the foot, the knee, the hip. Those are all going to be covered, the bony surfaces, by hyaline cartilage. We call it articular cartilage. For development, it turns out that hyaline cartilage is also what gives rise to bone. The entire skeleton of the fetus, with just a couple of exceptions, is laid out in a primitive version as kind of like a cartilage precursor. Well, that cartilage of the fetal skeleton is hyaline cartilage. And as bone takes over, we're going to see that when a baby is born, it's born with growth plates. The growth plates in the bone are actually made of hyaline cartilage. We call them the epiphyseal growth plates or epiphyseal plates. So hyaline cartilage is, again, the most abundant cartilage that we have throughout our entire bodies. The middle one is elastic cartilage on this slide. On the next slide, elastic cartilage is the image on the bottom. So elastic cartilage, let's talk a little bit about what it's made of. Same cells, we've got chondrocytes living in lacunae. You can see all the spots of the chondrocytes and the little lacuna surrounding each one. The extracellular matrix of elastic cartilage will contain collagen fibrils, just like our hyaline cartilage did, and elastic fibers. So the two fibers are going to combine to allow elastic cartilage to be able to be supportive, but flexible, and to tolerate repeated bending. Elastic cartilage can bend and recoil back to its original shape and size due to those elastic fibers. We have elastic cartilage in our external ear. So the structure of your ear, that cartilage in your ear, is elastic cartilage. The external auditory canal is lined by elastic cartilage. That's the tube of your ear. And then your epiglottis. The epiglottis is this little leaf-like flap that we find that every time you swallow, it bends down to cover the opening of the larynx so that food and liquids don't end up in our respiratory passageways. So the purple structures on this slide are all elastic cartilage. Ear, external auditory canal, and the epiglottis of the larynx are structures that are made of elastic cartilage. The last tissue type is fibrocartilage. Fibrocartilage is the strongest of all three cartilages. If you just looked at its base materials, you would see that fibrocartilage is made of the exact same materials as hyaline cartilage. If we look at fibrocartilage, we see that we've got chondrocytes living in lacunae. Now this is a lower magnification image, so the chondrocytes look much smaller here than they did in my hyaline cartilage picture or my elastic cartilage picture. But all of these purple spots, those are the chondrocytes and they're living in lacunae. The pink that you're seeing around the chondrocytes is the collagen. All we have in the extracellular matrix here for fibrocartilage is going to be collagen and the chondroitin sulfate ground substance. So again, the building blocks are the same as hyaline cartilage, but notice the difference. In hyaline cartilage, I couldn't make out any sort of pattern of collagen. It just looks like a big pink fluffy cloud of cotton candy here. In fibrocartilage, you can definitely see that the collagen fibers are a little bit thicker and they tend to be packed and stacked in a very organized way. Now, we don't always see this ladder-like appearance of collagen when we look at fibrocartilage, but what you'll notice is collagen fibers become very obvious, and you start to see almost like I would describe it as the grain of the collagen, just like you have grain of wood, right, that you might be looking at when you look at any sort of lumber. The collagen fibers are much more organized. And what that also does is it packs and it stacks the chondroitin sulfate firm gel ground substance. So fibrocartilage is going to be extremely strong. Not only is it strong at resisting the pulling forces because of all the collagen, but it's also very good at resisting the pushing forces. It has an extreme amount of compressive strength. And so we find fibrocartilage in places in the body where we have those extra strong forces. Going back to the original slide here, you find fibrocartilage, it's the red stuff. It's found in every single one of your intervertebral discs. All day long, when you're sitting, when you're standing, there are pushing compressive forces that are being forced upon all of those intervertebral discs. In fact, if you were to measure your height at the beginning of the day and the end of the day, you would probably see about 1/4 of an inch difference. At the start of the day, as long as you've lied down overnight and your intervertebral discs have had the space to kind of recoil back to their original size, kind of spring back, then you'll find that every morning you wake up at your true height, but by the end of the day, you're about 1/4 of an inch shorter if you've been standing and sitting, and all those compressive forces have collectively compressed every single one of those intervertebral discs all day long, just due to the weight of your body. Other locations that contain fibrocartilage is the pubic symphysis. That is the anterior joint here between our coxal bones, so the hip bones, the pelvic girdle. The anterior joint is known as the pubic symphysis. There's a lot of compressive and tension forces that are being experienced by the pubic symphysis here. And then the last location is down in the knee. Each knee has two little kind of half-moon shaped cartilage cushions. They're called the menisci of the knee. Each meniscus is made of fibrocartilage. You can imagine almost your entire body weight is being placed upon this knee joint here. And so, that's just for standing. What happens when you start running and jumping, right? Incredible amount of compressive forces, pushing forces are going to be placed on that joint. The menisci made of fibrocartilage are able to withstand that intense pressure coming from the weight of the body. So the three locations, the intervertebral discs, the menisci in the knee, and the pubic symphysis for fibrocartilage here. Again, hyaline cartilage on the top, fibrocartilage in the middle, and elastic cartilage on the bottom. And you will want to make sure that you go back to the histology hit list for connective tissue and just make sure that you're noticing these unique characteristics of all three cartilage types in the examples that were given, as well as any sort of examples that you looked up on your own. So cartilage does grow, and it grows in two ways. Oppositional growth is growth from the outside, and interstitial growth is growth from within. I mentioned at the start of the lecture when I introduced cartilage that hyaline cartilage and elastic cartilage are surrounded by a thin layer of dense irregular connective tissue called the perichondrium. If we take a look at this top image here of histology, the hyaline cartilage strip is in the middle of the slide, and the blue that you're seeing out here represents the perichondrium. Well, in the perichondrium, we've got a lot of collagen running every which way. It's dense, irregular connective tissue, but it's just a thin covering. And scattered amongst the fibroblasts that are normally found in dense, irregular connective tissue are also going to be cells called chondroblasts. So blast is typically a cell that's immature. Chond, remember, was cartilage. So chondroblasts are immature cartilage cells. When appositional growth is stimulated, what happens is these chondroblasts that are living, hanging out in the perichondrium, they begin to start to lay down new extracellular matrix materials. These are the cells that build the collagen. These are the cells that build the chondroitin sulfate ground substance. And as they lay down new extracellular matrix around them, eventually the chondroblasts are going to be found, they're going to find themselves surrounded by cartilage matrix, surrounded by chondroitin sulfate, surrounded by collagen. And when that occurs, the cartilage has just grown. It pushes that perichondrium out even further, and the cartilage is growing and basically thickening from its outer surface, growing in both directions is how this would happen on this slide here. Interstitial growth occurs when a mature chondrocyte within the cartilage divides. So chondrocytes like to live in lacunae, we've talked about that, but it's only one chondrocyte per lacuna. Otherwise, if there were more than one, the cells would run out of supplies. There's only enough materials in a lacuna to support the survival of a single cell. So if interstitial growth has been stimulated, the chondrocyte undergoes mitosis. And when that chondrocyte undergoes mitosis, again, a chondrocyte is a mature cell, it starts to, actually both of them, start to lay down new extracellular matrix materials. And so when they start to lay down new extracellular matrix materials, new collagen, new chondroitin sulfate, they end up pushing each other apart. And when they do, eventually they will end up in their own lacuna and they'll finally settle back down. And really the job of a mature chondrocyte is just to maintain the matrix around it. That's why it's so important to have these living cells. If the chondrocytes, the mature cells of cartilage, were to die, then the matrix in that area would begin to degenerate. So chondrocytes don't build new matrix normally, but they do maintain the existing matrix. They do only build matrix when interstitial growth occurs. And again, that's going to be preceded by mitosis. Two chondrocytes should never be found in the same lacuna. So they end up building matrix to push each other apart. Then they'll settle back down and just maintain the matrix that's within them. So this is how cartilage can grow from within. It gets larger and larger, kind of thickens from within.